All right, here we are in the great state of Texas. We're just out of Comstock, Texas, just a little way out of Del Rio, Texas, on the Rio Grande. And we're going to be going through the Seminole State Park. And I want to introduce you to Mr. Alan Wright. Alan, thank you very much for having us and being our host today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
And if you could, just share with us kind of some of the area and what people could be expected, what they will expect to find when they come here.
All right, sir.
Thank you very much, Alan.
You bet. Thank you. We have right here before us a depiction, a mural on the wall of the early bison kill, approximately 10,000 years ago. This is one of the ways that the early Americans here in the United States obtained their food. You can see, as depicted here, the buffalo are driven like in a herd up to the edge of a high cliff or off the edge of into a canyon. And then as they were driven off of the canyon, they fell down, and being wounded, they were then slaughtered or killed by the local people. This is one of the best ways that they had at that time of killing their food and so you can see depicted down here in the bottom the people waiting on the buffalo as they came off the top. And it's very crude, but it was a very efficient way for them to obtain their food. All right, we have right here a small diorama, which is the mouth of Seminole Canyon. It is where you can see in the very background back there where Seminole Canyon empties into the Rio Grande. Right at the mouth of this canyon is Panther Cave, or Panther Shelter. There's a depiction, has the art there, the pictographs from the early people, and of a huge panther. And I believe that you all have this on your tape. We're here a few months ago and did a small session here at that time. But as you can see, back some 12,000 years ago, we did have the early mastodons in here, had the camels, small camels, and also the buffalo up there. We have right here an overall view, aerial view of Bonfire Shelter that you saw previously there where the buffalo were driven off the top. This right here is the area that they were driven up here, and they fell right down in this area here where the Indians waited for them to fall, where they could slaughter them down in this area right in here. As you can see, the University of Texas came in here in the early 50s and did some digs. This here is a dig where they have dug down through the debris in the cave, and as you can see, there's still quite a few bones of the early bison left in this area right here. We have here a small diorama. This is a depiction of how the Indians obtained another method that they obtained their food. This is of the more common variety here. If you'll notice that we have like beaters, and they are driving the rabbits. You can see the small rabbits and the net. And what they would do, they would make these nets approximately 30, 40 feet, and kind of like a wing, and drive the rabbits up into these wings and capture them in these nets, and then with the small clubs that they have in their hands, which are called rabbit clubs, they would then hit the rabbit over the head. You can see in the very background back in there smoke coming out of a shelter. This is called the Fate Bell Shelter. This building that we're standing on right here, right now, is placed right above that shelter. And in a few minutes we will be going down in this shelter from this building. We have here on this wall the food chain that the Indians used at this time. Right here we have a depiction of what we call lechuguilla, which is a small dagger-like plant. They ate the root of this plant right here and used the long leaves for their matting and making their sandals. Also, here is the soto, which is also was the same use. They ate the root, would kick these things over and eat the root of them, cook them up and eat the root. They also used the long stalk, which I have one here in my hand, as a walking stick. And the leaves were also used as matting. Right down below here you can see that these Indian women are preparing the root of the soto. Right here they have a basket full of them. What they would do after they are prepared, they would go to an area where there is a small depression in the ground, as you can see here, line this depression with rock, then build a fire in there, and as the coals grew very intense, they would throw these roots of the soto in here. And then they would cover it with either a hide, cover it with a hide, and then put dirt over the top of it and pressure cook it then for about 36 to 48 hours. This tenderized it and made it very palatable. You can see right here they have uncovered their pit, and with these sticks they're taking the roots out. This here is just kind of a variety of what the Indians ate. You can see the snails right here, a lizard. Then they had their greenery here, the pear, prickly pear, and this whole country, they used all of the vegetation that they in the whole country for food. These Indians were known as the hunters and gatherers. They spent probably around 95% of their time looking for their next meal and preparing for their clothes and their sandals, just for existence. We have right here some tools of survival of these Indians. As you can see, we'll start right down here at the bottom. We have some basket material that has been woven out of the soto. Then right up above that we have a smaller weave, which was probably of a mat maybe. And also on this side we have the sandals made out of the soto and the lechuguilla. These are actual artifacts that have been taken out of the Fate Bell shelter down here. As you can see on the depictions here, the baskets were some of the baskets were woven with grass and were tight enough to actually even hold water. Most of them were just used to carry their food or their belongings as they migrated from place to place. And on this small section here, we also have, you can see the netting that they used, the rabbit netting made out of grass. Their sticks here that they used for digging across here. Also their fire stick right here. And these are small reed shafts that they used in their hunting. Yeah, I mentioned the rabbit sticks a while ago. You can see the rabbit sticks up at the top up there, and they are in a curved manner so that they could be either thrown or used at the end of your hand. As we come on around, you can see some of the other things, the bead work that they have done. We have the snail shells and also some small reeds that were made like into necklaces. They had some seashells that they used as necklaces also. And the arrowheads, the points made out of the flint that they used for hunting. This is a small replica here of a grindstone where they ground their food. We have Lake Amistad here in this area, and the lake has backed up and has cut off Panther Cave. This is Panther Cave right at the mouth of Seminole where it hits the lake down at the Rio Grande. And we have a depiction here, diorama behind me on the wall of Panther Cave. As you can see, we have the shaman type figures here. I will point your attention to the head. These are of the red monochrome era. And as you'll notice, they do not have heads as we know them today. There just seems to be like a mass up there, or even in this here, just kind of a couple of uprights there. These shamans have their arms extended here, and in their hands they usually have some sort of native plant, which is an indication that they realized that where their food came from, and so they used these shaman-type figures, which were actually real people in their family group, and they reseeded the land with these native plants as they used them up. As we come on across here, you'll see various and sundry other type small shaman figures. Larger ones here, some smaller ones here, and most of these figures. Now this here is also a shaman type figure. We're not really sure exactly what the meaning of this is. As you might be able to see here, we have a picture of panther, his tail up here, and also his feet. This is where the name Panther Shelter came from. They named it after this panther that is drawn in there. As we continue on around, you will see other type figures here. Another shaman type figure. He is yellow. Here, and we have one that is black. Here's one here. And if you'll notice, he has quite a few arrows stuck into him. He appears to be a post here. Notice that we also have quite a few arrows around on this figure right here, which is also a shaman figure. We have here the depiction of a typical family. This area is actually down in the shelter that we're going to visit. You'll notice here that we do have the mat, woven mat, the baby laying on the mat, and the woman here preparing the food for the day. Small basket, and also another grindstone here. As you can, I don't know, can you see this over here? We have the shaman figures right up here painted on the wall. And as we go down into the Fate Bell shelter, we will actually see this and be right up close to this over here. You will see over here a little bit further over, we have the man and his son sitting here. They have their utensils or their equipment here with them. They seem to be tying an arrow onto a shaft and preparing for a hunt. We have on this side over here a mural, which is the panoramic view that we see from Fate Bell Shelter as we go down in there. I will draw your attention to a couple of things. We have an old mesquite tree here, which is over 100 years old. We'll see that down there. And also we have right up here a tree that is growing out of the top of the ceiling. So these things are some of the unique things that we'll see as we go down into the canyon. Here we have the coming of the railroad. Around 1880 to 1890, the railroad came in through this area. They were looking for a southern route through here into from the east coast to the west coast. And this is some of the pictures of some of the hardships that they encountered. This is very rough country, and they did not have the ability to span the large canyons such as the Pecos River. So what they had to do was build a smaller railroad down through the Rio Grande and cross the mouth of the Pecos. And these pictures here are just some of the railroad camps and the work that was going on along that time. We have two railroad tunnels down in the Rio Grande. One of them is about a quarter of a mile long, and the other one is probably about 4/10 of a mile long. And these tunnels and also the cuts that were made by the railroad in that time were done with black powder, which is they had to use because they didn't have dynamite at that time. So the work went very slow, and it was very arduous work. Over here on this side, you can see this is the bridge that spanned the mouth of the Pecos River right here, and you can see the grades coming down here. And also you can see the grade here as it came down around and came through the canyons as it was coming, making its way down. Right here you can see the tunnel, one of the mouths of the tunnel that they had to dig to get down through there. It was pretty hard work. They did it with a star drill, and what they would do would they'd take a star drill about the size of this stick and hold it against the wall, and while one man held the drill, another man would pound it with a sledgehammer. And with this motion, as he pounded on this end, the man holding the drill would turn it, and this would drill a small hole into the wall. And then after they had drilled several of these holes into the wall, they would fill them with black powder and touch them off, and then get a small explosion, move a small amount of the rock and that needed to be moved. So it was very hard. There was quite a few cuts and 2 large tunnels and quite a few canyons, side canyons, as you can see right here, that had to be bridged. The railroad was completed around 1890, and as you can see, some of this here is of what we call painted cave. This is old type railroad engine sitting there with some of the people. It was called Parida Stop or Parida Cave area. The west of the Pecos River, the railroad construction was done mostly by Chinese. So on the west side of the Pecos, we have the Chinese work, and you can see some of their old tools and some of the old things that they used. In here you can see an old walk that has been was broke here. And on the east side of the Pecos was done by the Europeans. So on one side you have a different class people working as opposed to another class working on the other side. The bridge across the Pecos was finally completed, a large bridge, around the 1900. They had the ability then to go ahead, make a large bridge, which is depicted right here. You can see the work, construction, how high the girders were. It's a very extensive type construction, and how they constructed it across here. The new bridge, which is the present bridge that is being used at this time, is depicted right here in this picture. This bridge was constructed around 1940, just prior to World War II. And it cut off about 14 miles of the old railroad, of the 1890 railroad. So it made quite a bit of difference in being able to get stuff through this country from one coast to the other. Along with the coming of the railroad in the 1890s and 1900s came the ranchers. The ranch, as we can see here, we have a few articles that were used during that time. We have a pear burner here, down here, which was very vital. They used this to burn the pear, which they fed the livestock. We have an old type saddle here, and also we have a pair of chaps, which is very vital in this country because of all of the brush that has stickers on it, and very vital piece of equipment for the local horsemen. Also, you can see up here some of the old ranch hands and some of the depiction of the old windmills and the cattle drives that they had back during that time. We have here a Ramble A ram is a depiction of the sheep that they use in this country. As you'll notice, the wool. These sheep are very proficient at extracting the minerals through the grass, the plants that they have in this area. They did very well in here, so this became sheep and goat country. The cattle had a hard time eating the grass because it was so short. The sheep has a unique mouth. He only has teeth on the bottom, and therefore he is able to reach down and get a small tuft of grass between his bottom teeth and his upper gum and pull, and then he pulls up the grass and he's able to eat it. So as you see right here, wool and mohair became a very vital commodity in this area through here. You can see the number of sheep. The sheep shearers in this area right here, shearing the sheep, and as they took it to market, it was hauled over into the Del Rio area to a warehouse where it was bagged and hauled to this warehouse. Then after shearing, the wool buyers would come through and buy the wool. All right, we're standing here on the observation deck of the Seminole State Park headquarters. As you can see in the extreme distance down there, there is a shelter that the Indians used. This shelter is known only by a number. It's known as Valverde number 75. From this location to that location, it's approximately 2 miles. This is to give you some sort of idea about how far you can see in this country up here. The canyon itself runs right along in front of us. This canyon is called Seminole's Canyon. Seminole is a name that was given to it by the Indians, the early Indians that came in here in the 1800s that were imported by the Army, the Seminole Indians out of Florida. They were brought in here at this time and were used by the Army as scouts. We're going to go right off the edge here and right down, follow along the trail and go right to the edge of the canyon down there and right into the canyon and go into the main shelter, which is the Fate Bell shelter. All right, what you see in the foreground there is a shelter that has been used. This does not have a name, it's only known by a number. It's Valverde number 72. When the lake came into being in around 1960, the University of Texas came into this area and numbered these shelters. And this is Valverde 72. As you'll notice, the shelter is very low into the canyon and right in a curve. Around 1954, we had a very large flood in this area, and all of the debris and the slag and maybe the paintings that were on the wall were washed out of this cave or this shelter. There's nothing left in this shelter anymore. As we come on down the canyon, you will see some water in the canyon. This is the water comes from what we call seeps. We do not have very many springs in this country, but we do have small water seeps that will seep out from the different ledges out of the side of the canyon. As you come on around to our right over here, you will see the main shelter. This is called Fate Bell Shelter. As you can see, it's quite large. One of the premier shelters. The shelter itself is approximately 450 feet long and about 100 feet deep. In the very back of the shelter, we have an extreme amount of pictographs or paintings on the wall. As we go down, we'll go down off these into the canyon and walk down there and come up in that shelter. Just remember, if you start to fall, just start running fast. is slick rock, which during the summertime, the heat gets very intense down here in the bottom of the canyon. We get the radiation from the sun from the top, then after the rock heats up, we get the radiation back from the bottom. So if we have a temperature of around 100, and at the top up there, the temperature down in the bottom down here will be around 120. So the heat gets pretty intense in here in the summertime. From the water draining down through the limestone, as it drains down through it, then it'll hit a level, and it'll come out to out on the ledge out like that. So we have these little bitty seeps. Now this afternoon they'll all be dry. There won't be any water on them. But during the nighttime they start seeping, and then the heat dries it up in the daytime. We have larger seeps up here. Here's a large one up here. From down in this area here, you can see some of the pictographs as they start here on the edge of this wall. This small shelter here is known as a Fate Bell Annex, and you can see some of the paintings there. We have a platform over here on our left, steps up, and we can go right up in there and get up right very close to the painting. So let's go on up to the platform right up here. All right, we'll start around over here on our right. You see the paintings start up there fairly high on the wall. They have quite a few shaman figures up in there, and also some animal figures. We have some drawings that we're not really sure exactly what they are. We have some lines up there, small shaman figures, and as you come on around over here, you'll see a couple of large, very large type shaman figures, kind of on a bow right here. Any of you from the Gulf Coast there, you might recognize these as shrimp, jumbo shrimp, but actually they are actually shaman figures. Right in the center there, you will also see the depiction of a pear, what they call a pear shaman. As we come on around, you'll see a shaman up in there. Looks like he has ladder work. His body is a ladder. Notice that his head is nothing more than just a mass sitting on his shoulders. His arms are extended out, and each arm he holds a soap yucca bush. And the soap yucca, like the Soto, played a very vital role in their food chain, and also their supplies that they used for their matting and sandal making and basket weaving. If you'll notice, right around the edge and dripping off of the edge of the soap yuccas are some small dots. These dots are depicted as seeds or seed pods. So we seem to think that this shaman is maybe the shaman of good vegetables and plant reproduction in the area. He's probably shaking these seeds off for them to grow and have future supply of food. Next to him are some small shaman figures, are also are cactus shamans. And right kind of slightly up to the left there, you'll see another shaman type figure with just one arm. Right up above him, you'll also see another prickly pear shaman. This shaman is red and black. I will touch just a second on the pigment or the paint. The paint itself is made out of iron oxide, magnesium, and probably more than likely animal fat. It has a very adhering quality, and these shaman figures and paintings that we see in the cave here today are approximately around 2,500 years old. And I mention that to say that don't you wish that the house paint lasted like this. So they used this paint, ground it up and mixed it, and it had a very adhering quality. As we come on around to the center here, you will see right up on the very ceiling what we call the spitting panther. If you'll notice, the legs extend off a little bit to the left. His tail then curls around over his back, and notice that he seems to be spitting something out of his mouth. Well, also notice that his body is only half colored. And what we cannot see with our naked eye from this distance is the fact that there's an arrow stuck in the back of his neck. This to me depicts some sort of a kill, and that this panther is in his dying throes and he's coughing up his life blood right there. And this is the depiction. Right down underneath it, you'll also see another small shaman about 3 or 4 feet high. Notice that his arms are also extended, and he has in his hands also some sort of plant that he is distributing over the land. Right next to him, you see lines. Now these lines are very consistent. They appear in almost all of these shelters. These lines, some of them will be wavy lines, some of them will be straight lines, some of them will be curved lines as we see here. The archaeologists seem to think that these lines are some depiction of life. I talked to a French archaeologist not too long ago, and this archaeologist told me that these lines were very consistent, that they had these lines also in the pictographs in France. And he said that he'd been into Africa, and also the pictographs in Africa also had these type lines. And they vary, like I said, they vary from different shapes and sizes. As you see, we have a small shaman figure down low over here. This shaman is of a different variety. If you'll notice, he does have a head, he does have arms and his feet. Also, his body appears to be a shield. This type shaman appear up in the central United States and is of what we call the buffalo hunter type shaman. Now, we don't know what this man is doing in here, but evidently at one time or another probably there were some buffalo hunters from the Great Plains came down through here making some sort of a hunting trip, and they saw these pictures in these caves, so they decided that they'd leave their shaman here to visit. As you notice, we do have some graffiti up on the wall up here. Mr. Linderman and also Mr. Maynard were here in June of 1884. These gentlemen were probably powder monkeys for the railroad. We have 2 different kinds of handprints put up on the walls. These here are called positive handprints. This is where they dip their hand in the paint, then place their hand against the wall. These are very unique here because they not only dipped their hand in the paint, they then took a stick and drew lines through the paint on their hand and put their hands up on the wall, giving it the skeleton effect. The other kind of handprints that we have are called negative handprints, and they are where they placed their hand against the wall, and either through their mouth or through a hollow tube of some sort, they blew the paint against the wall, giving the outline of their hand. Look like horseshoes, are you talking about? Yeah, that's they're painted on there. They call them horseshoes, but actually we don't really know what they are. They have some sort of meaning. You know, there's no link between the Indians of this time and the people that came in during the migration, you know, starting in the 1600s. They were all gone, died out by then. I believe the first place we'll stop down at this, what I call the kitchen rock down here. Right in there, we have what we call our 10 little Indians. There's 10 stick figures right in there, all of them standing there holding hands. We all heard of the 10 little Indians? There they are. There they are. All right, this is the area that I call the kitchen rock. If you pass by here, you can place your hand on it, and you'll see that it has a high glaze on it, or even a real fine finish. This rock was used for all sorts of things. They prepared their food on it. They prepared their hides on it. They sharpened their tools. You can see the groove marks in the rock where they sharpened their bone tools. This is kind of where the gossip probably all took place. They just prepared their food and did most of their work right here on this rock. Through the centuries, the hand oil and the oil from the animals that they had caught has put a real high glaze or gloss on this rock. It's very slick.
You know, the most beautiful thing that we find on documentaries is to find the ancient writings. And among these beautiful, this great stone that you've just witnessed here, I want you to see what stands out, what caught my eye, is a message left there, no doubt by part of the Celts that had traveled up this Rio Grande River. We knew they were there. We were expecting to find some type of documentation that they had visited with as large a tribe as we have here in this Seminole Canyon. So let's take it, let's look at it here up on this stone. It is very possible that the kai was actually cut by sharpening knives. But then the visitor placed a row, a very perfect row, right in the right fork of the kai, giving Cairo, which is Christ, of course. And then you have the stem line, which runs at the base of the kai, and there you have, in the cross itself, you have two lines going down from the stem line, and clear of the cross you have two lines going up from the stem line, and then one line down, very carefully not crossing the stem line or interfering into the edge of the kai, the leg of the kai, documenting that it is Ogham and not sharpening knives. If they were sharpening knives, they would have crossed that stem line helter-skelter. But, so what does it say? Naturally, the two lines down being an L, the two lines up being a D, and the single line down a B. And it's very simple then to simply add the valve, because this is vowelless Ogham, which was utilized sometime between 600 and 800 AD, and it is the word lib. And lib has a twofold meaning, and I think you'll appreciate this. It means a strip of skin or leather. And I have no doubt that lib is what he thought of when he saw this rock where they would sharpen knives and butcher their meat here on this stone. And then lib also, its second is wealth or riches. So Cairo, of course, is Christ, and it's on this huge rock. And I feel what the man of God stated was, Christ is our rock and our riches, lib. But at the same time, giving the purpose of what these people were using it for. America visited 600, 800 AD by Celts, you bet. you have observed a documented proof.
What we're seeing here is the panoramic view out of the main shelter here in the state park. This is the view that the Indians had many thousand years ago. As we come on around into the main shelter here, you will see that the shelter is what we call pock-marked. The floor is pock-marked. The floor has been dug before the state park came into being. State park came into being around 1978. Park opened in 1980. And all of these pits that were dug in here were dug prior to that time. These are dug by people, friends of the rancher, or maybe just people coming in and looking for Indian artifacts. And even though they have kind of dug things up, it gives us a little bit of a insight on some of the life of how these Indians lived. I'll direct your attention right down here in front of us at this first pit. You'll see that there's quite a bit of debris, matting in this area. Now what happened was that they'd come in, say, whenever they moved in, and they would lay down a floor of leaves from the soto and the yucca plants, and then they would bring in rocks to make their fire rings out of. Then they'd bring their fires, wood to make their fires, and this was the building process that they used. And after a period of time, this debris that we're standing on here was built up until we're now standing on approximately 13 feet of debris. And you can imagine the length of time that it took to build 13 feet of debris from laying down the floor and then bringing in the rock, and this is the ash and the trash that was left by the Indians. So it's over many thousands of years. You'll notice in the back reaches of the cave, right down close to the floor line, you'll see a tremendous amount of Indian paintings there. These paintings have been here for thousands of years, and not only that, then the next group of Indians would come in, would also make their paintings and paint, maybe not necessarily over the ones that were here, but just add to. So we can see a tremendous amount of paintings along the back line. I'll direct your attention to the next portion up from the ledge there, up from the floor. You'll see some symmetrical drawings right there in the center of the cave. You'll notice there's a square with legs. A lot of people seem to think this might be a South Texas deer blind, but I don't think so. This is some symmetrical drawings, some of the things that we just do not really know exactly what the meaning of them are. You'll see some more symmetrical lines just to the right of the box there. Some looks like a crown, also another small box there. And then just to the right of that, you'll see a winged shaman. His arms are wings, his arms are outstretched. Also notice that he's looking back to his right, back towards the boxes. He has antlers that come out of the top of his head. Also, I'll direct your attention to all of the soot or the smoke up on the very top of the cave. This is due to many years of campfires in here. But not only did the Indians decorate their walls, they did decorate their ceilings. So as you can see right here directly in front of us, you can see all kinds of murals, paintings up on the wall, up on the ceiling here. One in particular, right directly here in front of you, is a ghost-like shaman. Notice he is white. They were not able to make white, the pigment white, very easily. Some seem to think that it's made out of seashells or some material that was not natural to this area, but that was brought in. So we don't have very many white figures. But this figure here appears there. He appears as a ghost. He's about 10 feet long. And he does have a head, but he is a ghost shape. also along there you see other various types of shaman figures up on the ceiling. Down very low next to the floor, you will see that the paintings do extend on around. They come on around, extend on out around the edge here. You can see some plant life down here and some small shaman figures down real low in there. And also there are a few down below the floor line. They've decided not to uncover these paintings at this time because they want to see if there's any way that they might be preserved better. This next lip you see right here, we also have some paintings that are kind of faded out. We have a kind of a animal type here with arrows sticking into him, stuff coming out of his head, some small shaman figures, and they extend on along the edge of the wall going around this way. We do have right here, this is the premier painting of the shelter. This is called the Barefaced Shaman. This shaman is the main figure right here. Notice that his arms are extended, which are wings. They reach out and they encompass these other two shaman type figures here. This shaman here has horns. He has the head of a bear, and he also has horns. Now, we're not really sure where this fella here came from. He appears to be yellow, and he appears to be over the top of this shaman's wing right here. Notice that this shaman's feet point down, and this shaman's feet point inward towards this shaman, and also this one's feet here point in towards this shaman. But this fella here, his feet point out. We're not really sure exactly what the meaning of this is, but we feel sure that it had some significance at the time. Now again, this fellow right here has his bow, his arrows in his quill here, so to speak, and his atlatl up here. I mentioned before the lines in the cave. If you'll notice, we do have a line that starts right here. It is red and yellow, and it goes around on out and fades on out. We don't know exactly how far it does go, but it goes on out quite a ways. Very consistent, these lines in these paintings here.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it magnificent? And just to think, that it's 2,500 years old, It's just unreal how...
So much detail in
it is. Notice the shades, the black, the main is black, part is black, and then we have the tan up on top with the red at the bottom, and how it's all shaded and faded in together, shaded together. It's just... And we have a line right here that runs through the painting up to the top with it's broke up at the top. Also, this one here runs up to the top and is broke over, They're just not really sure what the meaning of these things are. As we come on around right over here, we'll see a depiction of a Christian cross. This cross, I feel like, was probably put in here in the 1800s, maybe by the railroad workers that came in here at that time. It's not anything very recent, but at the same time, it's not the same age as the paintings on the wall. This area here is also an area where they prepared their food and did quite a bit of work. These rocks here have a lot of oil and hand oil and animal fat on them. They're slick. Right up in the top of these rocks right here, we have the grind holes. And these grind holes were used for preparing their food. Now the Indians, were not very big people. They were probably in a neighborhood of around 5 feet tall. And they used these grind holes. They would put their food in these grind holes, and with a stick sort of like this and a churning motion, they would grind their food in these holes. Well, as they ground their food, they also ground the end of the stick off, and the dust from the rock and the grit from the rock was also mixed into their food. So as they ate this food, usually by the age of around 25 or 30 years old, their teeth had been ground off almost even with their gums. And an Indian's life expectancy at about that time was somewhere around 35 to 40 years of age. So their longevity was not very great, and due to the process they used to fix their food. Also, there is a possibility that through the ages, the droughts that we have in this country from time to time, it helped with their demise, and there's just not a link between them and present-day man. So that is one of the mysteries that we have in this area. I will draw your attention to the old mesquite tree we have down here on the end. You can see the gnarly root system there. This tree is over 100 years old. And even though this tree's been here for over a century, it still has not been here very long compared to the time that the Indians were here and that these paintings were left on the wall. One other item that I will point out, we do have our tree growing out of the ceiling right up here, and the view that you see here, which is depicted up in the headquarters building there in the large diorama. On behalf of Seminole State Park, I'd like to thank each and every one of y'all for being here with us today and for coming along and seeing some of the history of this area.
And anyone can come.
Anybody has come. Yes, sir, you bet. You bet.
Alan, thank you very much.
Well, I
for
appreciate
hosting
it.
us through.
You bet.
And I know that all of you are going to want to see, when you pass through this way, don't miss Seminole Park. Certainly the age, how could we say probably were some of the oldest shaman and paintings?
The oldest pictures in this area are in the neighborhood of around 4,000 years old, but the majority of what we've seen today is around 25.
25. That's amazing.
2,500.
It's something to really see, to appreciate our America, the heritage that we inherit by being citizens of this country, and certainly always preserve, never destroy this precious heritage. Alan, again, thank you very much, and I know the folks will want to come by and see.
You bet. I appreciate y'all being here, Arnold, very much.
Thank you very much.
If there's anybody traveling in this area along Highway 90 west of Del Rio between San Antonio and El Paso, we'd like to invite you all to stop in this area, and we have a shaman tour that is conducted here in the park twice daily at 10 and also at 3 in the afternoon. We also have some other side shaman tours that we conduct in this area. So if there's anybody around that is very interested in these pictographs and these ancient people that lived in this area, we'll be glad to accommodate you any way that we can. We also have camping for RVs. I have a small RV park very near Comstock, and if there's any of you that'd like to come and be with us, feel free to come and be our guest, and we will accommodate you any way that we can.
Where do they contact you at?
Okay, we have a phone number. Our phone number is 915-292-4451. And if we don't answer the phone, we have our recorder, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can to give you the information that's available in this area.